Hello everyone, welcome back to Physio Odyssey. Dear members of the audience, today we are going to discuss a very simple but super important topic, static lung volumes and capacities. Every time we breathe, our lungs do not completely empty or fill. Some air always remains inside, and understanding how much air moves in and out is the key to mastering this topic. So let's make it very easy today. Before we move on to the actual diagram of a spirogram, let me first clarify three terms that sound very similar but mean slightly different things. A spirograph, a spirometry, and a spirogram. First of all, this over here is the spirograph. It is an instrument that is used to record different lung volumes and capacities. A spirometry is the technique of measuring different lung volumes using this machine spirograph. And a spirogram is the actual tracing obtained from a spirograph when a spirometry is performed. So in simple terms, a spirograph is an instrument, a spirometry is a process, and a spirogram is the result or tracing. Once this is clear, now let's look at the actual diagram of a spirogram and understand how these different lung volumes and capacities are represented in it. This is how the diagram looks in most textbooks, like in Guyton. It looks complicated, right? But don't worry, I will explain it in a very simple way. Let's start. I will try to explain different lung volumes and capacities using this diagram over here. First of all, I will start with these four lung volumes, then I will proceed toward the capacity. So, now let's start with tidal volume. First of all, what is tidal volume? Tidal volume is volume of air a person can inspire or expire with each normal breath. In a normal healthy adult male, it will be around 0.5 liter. About this tidal volume, at the top of this diagram, this over here is inspiratory reserve volume. Inspiratory reserve volume is the extra volume of air a person can inspire by forceful inspiration over and above the tidal volume. Below this tidal volume, this over here is expiratory reserve volume. Expiratory reserve volume is the maximum extra volume of air a person can expire by forceful expiration after the normal tidal expiration. Inspiratory reserve volume in a normal healthy adult male is around 3 liter. On the other hand, expiratory reserve volume in a normal healthy adult male will be around 1.1 liter. Below this expiratory reserve volume, this over here is residual volume. Residual volume is the air remaining in the lungs after the most forceful expiration. Okay, so this is all about the four different lung bodies. Now, let me tell you about the capacities. Before discussing about the four different types of capacities, it will be worthwhile to know what capacity is. Very simply, whenever two or more than two volumes are added together, they are termed as capacity. First of all, let me tell you about inspiratory capacity. Inspiratory capacity comprises inspiratory reserve volume and tidal volume. It is the amount of air a person can breathe in, beginning at the normal expiratory level and distending the lungs to the maximum amount. Okay, now the second capacity is functional residual capacity. Functional residual capacity comprises residual volume and expiratory reserve volume. It is the volume of air that remains in the lungs after the normal tidal expiration. Here it worth mentioning that the functional residual capacity is not to be confused with residual volume. Residual volume is the volume of air remaining in the lungs after the most forceful expiration. On the other hand, functional residual capacity is the amount of air remaining in the lungs after the normal tidal expiration. Okay, now the third capacity is vital capacity. What is vital capacity? Vital capacity comprises inspiratory reserve volume, tidal volume and expiratory reserve volume. These three lung volumes together make up the vital capacity. So vital capacity is the maximum amount of air a person can expel from the lungs after first filling the lungs to the maximum extent and then expiring to the maximum extent. Okay. After the vital capacity, only residual volume remains inside the lungs. Now the fourth capacity is total lung capacity. These four lung modules together make up the total lung capacity. Very simply, total lung capacity is the volume to which the lungs can be expanded with greatest possible effort. Okay, now that we have understood each lung volume and capacity clearly on the board, let's go back to Guyton diagram once again. This is the same concept represented in a standard textbook format. You can see how each lung volume and capacity we discussed fits perfectly here. Earlier it looked complicated, but now simple. Let's discuss a few important points on static lung volumes and capacities. Point number 1. Residual volume, functional residual capacity and total lung capacity cannot be measured by spirometry. The second point is all lung volumes and capacities are 20 to 30% lower in females as compared to males. The third one is with aging, residual volume increases and vital capacity decreases. The last point is during the first 20 years of life, residual volume gradually increases. Interestingly, residual volume of a 1-year-old child is more than a 25-year-old male. Alright, so we have covered these 4 key points. Now let's move a step deeper and understand the physiological reasons behind them through a few interesting conceptual questions. This is the question number 1. Why can't residual volume, functional residual capacity and total lung capacity be measured by spirometry? This is because residual volume never go out of the lungs and spirometry can measure the volume that is exhaled, not the air that is left behind the lungs. Okay. Because of this reason, any lung capacity that include residual volume like functional residual capacity, total lung capacity also cannot be measured by spirometry. Spirometry can only record the air that is moved in and out of the lungs during breathing, not the air that remains trapped inside after maximal expiration. Okay. Now, the next question is, why is residual volume important even though it cannot be measured directly? This is because if there is no residual volume, the alveolar walls will stick to each other. This led to the collapse of lungs. So the next question is, the third question is, why are all lung volumes and capacities generally 20 to 30% lower in females as compared to males? This is because evolutionary males have been physically more active. That is the reason their respiratory muscles are stronger as compared to females. Their chest walls are also larger and of course their lung size are also larger as compared to females. All these factors contribute to increased lung volume and capacities in males. This over here is the second last question. How does aging affect lung elasticity and what is its impact on residual volume and capacity? As we know, during the process of aging, our skin starts losing elasticity. Similarly, our lungs also start losing elasticity, particularly after the age of 60. Okay. This leads to increased residual volume. Although, here it worth mentioning that the total lung capacity remains relatively stable. So, increasing residual volume causes the decrease of other lung volumes. And as we know, these 3 lung volumes, expiratory reserve volume, tidal volume and expiratory reserve volume together make up the vital capacity. So, increase in residual volume causes the decrease in vital capacity. Here it worth repeating that this shift occurs because the total lung capacity is constant. So, increase in its one component necessitates the decrease of another. Is that clear? Now the next question is, this one is the last question. Why does residual volume gradually increase during first 20 years of life? This is because from birth to first 20 years of life, during the course of development of a child, lung elasticity improves. That is the reason the residual volume decreases as lungs mature. Okay. So that completes our discussion on static lung volumes and capacities. In the next lecture, we will move on to dynamic lung volumes, and later we will apply both concepts to understand obstructive and restrictive lung diseases. Thank you for watching. This is Physio Odyssey.